Sri Lanka විශාලතම උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ප්‍රදර්ශනය සහ රැකියා පොළ EDEX Mid-Year Expo 2024 සැප්තැම්බර් 6 7 සහ 8 BMICH දී දේශීය හා විදේශීය උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ආයතන 100කට වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් සමගින්.
Don't miss the EDEX Mid-Year Expo 2024, Sri Lanka's largest education exhibition and job fair, September 6th, 7th and 8th at BMICH. Discover the best in higher education and future career paths. Entrance free.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the EDEX pre-event seminar series as we lead up to the EDEX Expo on September 6th, 7th and 8th at the BMICH. Today's speaker, Mr. Seninda Bandara, is a data-driven advertising professional with over 16 years of experience in integrated communications. He is the founder and managing director of Boutique Agency Network Private Limited, where he has played a pivotal role in introducing data-driven advertising practices to Sri Lanka. Also, Boutique Agency Network is the EDEX knowledge partner at this expo.
Hi everyone. Hello. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, Seninda, we can hear you.
All right.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for being here today. And let me begin with my presentation. So I'm going to tell you something about how do we get started with the AI-driven entrepreneurial career. So before I start with the formal session, so what I'll do is I will quickly take you through, as Mahesh also given a brief introduction. So basically, Boutique Network, what we have is that we have 3 different companies. Boutique Agency Network is our prime, the main company, that is the data-driven integrated marketing company. And then we have Boutique Republic, which is a tech company, which is also more closer to AI and data-driven practices. And we are building certain technologies in that company. And then we have Boutique Media Network, which is a marketing entertainment ecosystem, which we have a couple of interesting brands where we are sort of creating certain ecosystem around these entertainment brands. We started our journey in 2016 as just a startup, but focusing on agile marketing practices, or rather bringing agile marketing practices to Sri Lanka. And then in 2022, we became one of the few agencies in South Asia which won this title of Agency of the Year. So we also became one of those agencies. And so we proved with that, in fact, being a small agency, or rather being a startup agency, started with nothing, that reach up to the level of being an agency of the year. And we have actually given an inspiration to most of the people in Sri Lanka, that not just only for the advertising fraternity, but also anyone who's interested in startups, that you can start with nothing, but you can climb up in the ladder. So I'm not going to take you through my portfolio, but let us start with the session. So now in this scenario where we are talking about get started with an AI-driven entrepreneurial career, so it's basically we are going to talk about three things. So there's AI, entrepreneurship, and career. So how I'm going to connect all of that together is connecting entrepreneurship, AI, and career together is what the combination of these three things are what we call as how are we going to get started with the AI-driven entrepreneurial career. So before we start with this particular AI-driven entrepreneurial career, the first thing what we need to understand is what do you mean by the entrepreneurial career? So I guess that, most of you are either planning on starting your own startup, or maybe, it's somewhere down the line that you would want to become an entrepreneur. So now, let me take this to this side. So basically, what you see here is that, either you can become, there could be a corporate life versus there is an entrepreneurial life. But you have to be mindful of which side or which life that you are going to choose. Because at the end, either it's entrepreneurial career or either it's a corporate life, it's a state of life. It's a choice that you are going to choose. And then it's a state of life, because I have to tell that upfront before we start with this whole bubbly concept of starting AI-driven entrepreneurial careers. But before that, we need to understand entrepreneurial, or rather entrepreneurship, is a state of life. So therefore, I'm going to again keep it here. So number two is what is AI and entrepreneurship. So that is also another critical finding that we need to understand. So I'll give you one example. So if anyone who's interested in getting into either AI or either technology entrepreneurship, so always refer this particular graph or sort of it's the Gunter report. Basically, they say it's called the hype cycle. So what you see here is the latest hype cycle. You'll see generative AI is at the latter part. So basically, generative AI is at the sort of the tail end. What it means is that, and it is getting into the something called delusion. So where it is going to be moving away from being a very having a higher hype in next 2 to 5 years time. Generative AI's hype, whereas in the minds of investors and also from a market point of view, is going to get reduced. It doesn't mean that generative AI is going to move out from the world or anything, but it means is generative AI might become a mainstream in 2 to 5 years time. So therefore, what we need to understand is that if we want to get into an entrepreneurial career, especially in this focus area of AI, generative AI is something that you have to do today. But something like what is at the, at the other end, it's called large action models. It's also connect with today's terminology of AI, that if you have ever gone through this, you will know there are certain terminologies like, started with large language models, like it's called as LLM, and then it moved into large vision models. And now we are talking about large action models also in the future. So next 10 years down the line, large action models will have a higher hype, or rather it will come to the plateau stage where like saturated in the market, it will happen in next 10 years time. So therefore, it is needed to have a wider idea of where do we need to focus on. So all what I have to say is AI is now or never. So you have to start it now. Otherwise, you are not going to do anything. And now this is something that I want to tell you or rather show you. During last couple of years, this is the Ngram river of Google. So what it means is that all the research documentation or any published document regarding a particular topic that you can see here. So those two graphs that you see here is artificial intelligence versus generative AI. So all this time from 1980s to the early 2020s, artificial intelligence seems to have a higher rank. But the last couple of years, actually this data is until 2022. What we see is there's a huge spike in terms of generative AI. So there are a lot of publications, there are a lot of research were done in this area of generative AI. So what it means is that it shows us how lucrative generative AI is. But now, when we put cybersecurity into this particular equation, you can see there's a huge gap between the research and the publication done in the area of cybersecurity versus generative AI. So what is this mean? What this means is that, this is the demand gap, but doesn't mean that people are not doing enough research on generative AI versus cybersecurity. But it means is cybersecurity as an area is vast in terms of research and development. Not saying particularly research and development, but like in terms of the research publications, that area is much vast compared to generative AI. But now, when we add health, education, business, environment, and economy into this equation, you can see where cybersecurity stands. So likewise, there's a very important lesson we are going to learn here before we getting into the AI-driven entrepreneurial career. So what you see here is something like that. So the current scope of business or the current scope of environments like education, healthcare, all of that, those industries are, or rather those industries or those large scopes will be remaining. And the role, not the role, but like comparatively, the research done in AI compared to all these other areas, other scopes, you can see it's as a comparison, it's something like this. And now when we are moving into the interesting area, which is the entrepreneurial AI career or other AI-driven entrepreneurial career. So now what we need to understand is AI is a part of the solution. That's the most important thing. And if you remember those graphs that I showed you, all of these things, those are different environments like education, or it could be healthcare. And then we had AI, there were research done in terms of AI. But all we need to know is AI is a part of the solution. But what is critical is to knowing the problem. Before we get into the AI-driven entrepreneurship, all we need to understand is a problem. So this famous quote of Einstein, he said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes to thinking about the problem and 5 minutes to think about the solution. So likewise, do not start with a technology. And this is something that I've been hearing from a lot of youngsters. Whenever I meet most of them, they come and say like, okay, I have this idea, I want to create this technology. What do you think? I like, okay, what exactly the problem? So that's what you need to understand. So what are we going to solve out of it? So therefore, like I will show you a couple of examples. So this particular problem of lack of sustainable energy solution was the problem someone identified some time back. I will move myself to middle. And the solution was Tesla. Likewise, another problem, lack of wide selection of products available online. Someone identified this in late, 1980s or early 90s. The solution was Amazon. There's another problem, the lack of platform connecting, a lack of a platform for connecting people online. And of course, you know what he did. So he didn't start with Facebook. He found a solution to solve that problem when he was at his college. And then, importantly, the inconvenience of renting physical DVDs. I'm not too sure, people from your generation, whether you have really done this. So you really you know the problem. You might not really resonate this problem with you because we are from that generation who has rented DVDs. So what happened was that was the problem, but Netflix came to the picture to solve that problem, that at the initial stage of Netflix. But Netflix is a very good case study if you want, if you are really interested in entrepreneurship, just go and refer that, because that shows how adaptive they are. And that's one of the very important things before we get into any particular startup career. So in today's context, AI, when it comes to Netflix, if you go to their research site, you'll see the amount of research that they do in terms of AI, or rather connecting with different parts of AI, like including machine learning and including things like analytics, consumer understanding, all of that. So AI is at the heart of Netflix. If not for AI, Netflix will not be able to be the same Netflix as what they have today, because they know the consumer very well. So what they do is they use AI to identify deep audience behavioral intelligence. And then they provide those information. They identify, like, if you refer their videos, they will be able to see so many different, they'll be able to identify many different behavioral patterns. And then accordingly, what they'll do is those behavioral patterns, they are going to basically use as an insight for the producers who are making films. So they will be able to create better films that will connect with those audiences, and therefore those audiences will remain with Netflix. So that's the most important thing. And then we are going to get started. So basically, when we are going to start with the AI-driven entrepreneurship, the first thing what you need to understand is there are three things. So I always love these Venn diagrams, because I mean, it depends on different people. When you're interested in any particular thing, especially either it's a startup or either it's anything that you do with your job, write it in such a way that you'll be able to, I mean, it'll be easier for you to understand. So I always use Venn diagrams because it's easier for me to understand such things. So basically, I'm using these three specific areas. So the first area is, it could be the industry, market, in any particular environment. It could be any environment, like this is not the ecological environment, it could be any environment or a culture. And then the second pillar is the problem or the need gap. So that is the most important thing in any particular culture or any particular industry, market, the need gap. Understanding that need gap is the most important thing. And then you have AI-driven technology. Don't start with the technology. Always starts with connecting the industry, a market, or whatever. It could be an environment or any culture, and try to understand the need gap. That is the most critical thing. What we are trying to understand is what is the problem and the cause behind that problem. What causes the problem? Because that is the journey that we need to spend a lot of time to understand what are we trying to solve. So now I'll give you an example here. This is just these are not like scientific examples. These are just layman examples. So don't judge anything based on these examples. So let's say now the country, we all know that, a couple of years back, we had a problem. It was a fuel shortage crisis we had. And the cause for that, what we can find in a ways, was lack of funds, that we didn't have funds to buy fuel. The country didn't have funds to buy fuel. So therefore, there was a shortage. Then that's a very important thing. When we are trying to understand these problems, always we need to figure out there are short-term problems and long-term problems. So if it is a short-term problem, then it might not give us, it's not going to be very lucrative for us to invest in a problem like that. We might well as invest in a problem that is more long-term. So basically, if you look at this particular scenario, the vibrance of the course for a startup or to develop a new technology is less and short-term. But what if I change the way how I'm going to think of the same problem? And this is where you have to use your brain. You have the fuel shortage, but imagine the reason behind the fuel shortage. So one person might say, okay, fuel shortage happened because there is no such fund for us to buy fuel. But there could be a smart person might say, no, the reason behind the fuel shortage was we didn't have enough electric vehicles. Then someone can again argue, okay, like, okay, then again you need fuel for the plants, but keeping that aside, there could be logical arguments here, but I'm taking this as an example. Now, if we look at this as the cause, people do not have electric vehicles, then that cause will have a higher value because there's a higher value in investing in that particular cause because it will have a high vibrant in the cause itself as well as, but it is going to be a long-term thing. It's not going to be like in a very short term you are going to gain anything, but it will be a technological involvement. So likewise, you have to figure out your idea by looking at these two things. So remember to figure out the problem. So especially when it comes to the whole scope of AI, if you start with AI, you will kind of get lost in this whole scope of AI. Therefore, start with the problem. In any day-to-day problem, you will see there is a requirement of having an AI. So now I'm going to show you something. Again, this is just a hypothetical example. Even the image was generated using the GPT-4. So now I'll show you, this is a hypothetical example. And this is basically how do we really crack ideas. This is the day-to-day, day-in-a-life scenario. So the problem that it could be a problem that someone might identify. Ideally, your problems have to be quantified. So it needs to have some sort of you start with the problem through observation or something, but then you need to put research into action to understand whether this problem is a real problem or how big is this problem. So we'll talk about that later. The problem here, what we have identified was back and neck ache are common new. So the cause for this particular problem was identified as spending more time in the wrong posture. So that was a problem. That's the reason why people are getting more neck and back aches. The idea is that, it's a tag that, you can use it. This is just a hypothetical thing. But if anyone thinks this is a good area, anyone can explore this. There's no copyright in this. I don't know as far as I know. So you use a tag. So this tag can actually identify real-time posture using AI. So maybe using certain parameters, the distance, the angle, or it could be anything. So the whole good thing about AI is, what do you mean by AI in the first place? It's artificial intelligence, right? That we all know. So what it means is also, I'm not going to say the meaning of that, but the whole scope of AI is that through AI, you will be able to do things using multiple data points in a much better way. It is an advanced way of how human think, but it's in today's context, people are trying to create human-like AI, the way how humans think, and they're trying to improve AI into that. So which means AI is still a little behind. What is fast in AI is that the speed. It gives you all these answers better than or rather faster than how human does it. So that's the difference in terms of the output of it. But in this scenario, basically, you can use the technology and you don't have to start with the technology in the first place. That's why I said, like, start with the problem. When you see this problem, you will have multiple solutions for this. So this is a solution that I came up with. So how do we identify the posture using a small gadget? And that gadget is AI infused. So therefore, it identifies through the movement, through the heat, or through the distance to the whatever that, to that heat distance, or through heat maps, whatever. It's all through AI. And then it can generate notifications through certain connected apps. Then it's easier. So this is how you come up with ideas. But doesn't mean that when you come up with these ideas, the ideas are going to sell at the first sight. So even if you go to investor, or even when you have a co-founder, or even when you go to the market, the questions that you are going to, the problem that you're going to get, like the first question is, what is your business model? So in this scenario, my answer is that, okay, I'm going to create this particular product. It's basically, I'm going to sell this product to the people who would want to have this unit. That is number one. And then my other business model is basically how I'm going to generate my revenues. It's more than the business model, it's my revenue model. And I'm going to generate revenue through advertising sales through those connected apps. Imagine I have an app. So the one that who's buying this product, that he needs to download the app to activate it. And on that app, that I get notifications when I'm in a wrong posture. And then when I'm sending those notifications, there is a way that I can integrate ads also into it. And for those ads, I'll be able to get certain merchants to connect with. So likewise, I'll be able to, this is the first thing that you need to know. So if you are thinking of an idea, the next thing what you need to do is, especially when it comes to the whole AI part of it, don't bother too much on the technology side of it. Because if you want to solve the technology matters, there are people that you can hire. Or rather, you can get them as co-founders, like a CTO, the tech person. But the most important thing in any particular company or any particular startup is identifying the problem and quantifying the problem, and then finding the revenue that you can generate through capitalizing on that problem. Then the next question would be like, these are the questions that you need to answer when you are thinking of an idea. Sometimes you have to drop your idea, or sometimes you have to think through your idea, like when you get into this. So why would someone buy your product? So then this is where you need to understand the reason behind, the cause behind the product, the truth. The truth is that when you have this product, you will be able to, the promise that you are going to give through this product is that people can fix their posture whenever they are in a wrong posture. So therefore, you don't have to, get any disturbance in terms of, having a backache or a neck pain. So therefore, you'll be consistently, you can stay a no pain life. That is one. And then the other benefit is that it also prevents the need to take advanced physiotherapy, and it may save about like approx $1,000 medical expenses. So that is something, a promise that you are going to give to the people. So likewise, when you are developing any technology, or when you are thinking of developing any technology, just think of what is it for the person who is going to buy that. That's the most important thing. And then you need to ask this question very well. Who is the most significant customer for your product? So this is where that you need to do a lot of research to understand. It doesn't mean that you have to get a research company to do this research, but sometimes certain research can be done simply using search. You can identify the search ranking, and then you can figure out which particular area or which particular consumer could have the highest involvement or the highest probability. So now what you see here is just a very brief scenario, but this is something done for a different purpose. But basically I'm using the same metric. So what this metric shows you is that it has two axes. For if you are interested, I mean these things you can find out. There are various different metrics as to identify audiences. So one side of it is the attractiveness of the market. The other side is ability to win in terms of in that particular market. So now I take these markets as the customer segments in this scenario. So I have two segments I have identified. So I don't know whether it's visible for you, but it says the first part, it is the ability to win is little moderate, but attractiveness is very high because I see that audience is very lucrative for me. That is the tech community. Because the tech community is generally, they spend a lot of time in wrong postures. So that is an observation. But the problem is ability to win is little bit moderate because they do a lot of research and they do like a lot of back research. They might do comparisons, they might do a lot of things before they purchase. But then also looking at let's say this is a hypothetical scenario. So there could be like 5% to the national population or the working population. So that is the audience size. But then I see another audience. That audience is like the drivers, the ones that who drive as a part of their job. So maybe it could be like an Uber driver or pick me driver. It could be anyone. They also drive and they also sometimes drive a long distance with wrong posture. So that also causes these pains. For them, what I said earlier, the more than the no pain thing, it's also given, but also saving the expenses of potential medical expenses is very important. Now, when we say that, okay, you don't have to visit to a physiotherapy or any of these, for that particular condition, you don't have to visit a doctor. If you have this small gadget and you buy this for this much, and then I will be able to give you like a installment offer, that will be much more lucrative. So the driver segment is like 15% to the working population if I take it as just a hypothetical number. So I see there's a big chunk of an audience over there. So then I'll be able to adapt this product, communicate this product according to that particular audience. But there is a way that, if I'm talking to the tech community, there's a way how I have to communicate it. So we call it the value proposition. So what is the value that we are going to exchange with these people from a psychological sense? So for the tech community, if we say, okay, so this is the whole scenario and we show them the magic of this technology from a tech perspective. But whereas if it is a three-wheel drive or a driver that we are communicating, we show them we have to show them the price point and the benefit of it in a very different way. The value proposition will change according to the consumer segment that we are going to communicate. So that is why identifying this customer persona. Now, if you hypothetically identify this as one particular customer, who is that customer? Who is that person or who is that human? That is very important to understand. So knowing them, that will solve most of your problems. And then the million-dollar question is, now imagine that you set up your business and it's into tech, it's into AI. And what is our expansion? So now, these are certain other models that we use to understand where do we really fit. So there are certain companies, they call themselves, or rather they get into the whole scenario of inventors, or either they'll become early adapters. So what you mean by that is, inventors are the ones that who are creating technologies for the first time, or they're experimenting the technology for the first time. The early adapters are like, for instance, as I said earlier, generative AI, that you have to become an early adapter now, because in 2 to 5 years time, the whole platform, the whole technology will get into a plateau situation according to Ganter. So therefore, it's always important for you to become an early adapter. what will happen is certain companies will become early majority afterwards. So they absorb the technology once they see that, okay, this technology is moving, and then they will adapt into it. And then there are certain, we all know that in a market, technology adoption happens. Some people buy the technology at a very latter part of the technology. So we call them as the late majority. So most of the scenarios in our, like in our boutiques story also, we are more or less love to play as an innovator or the innovator, that the first part of being innovators, or rather doing inventions, and early adapters. So we develop technologies, we develop things for tomorrow. But what happens is, right now, you will not get a higher market share. The graph, the line that you see, that goes up to 100, it is the market share. So it will be like at the very early stage, like when a technology is having a lot of early adapters, you will not get a higher market share. But when you have the late majority and the laggards who are like getting into the technology just even after everything, that is where you will be able to get the higher share. So that's very important to become an early adapter to any particular technology if you are especially getting into a AI specific startup. And also, one of the thing that I would want to tell you is that don't start if you are short-sighted. If you want to earn quick cash, quick money, don't start AI-driven businesses right now. Because the AI, generative AI, or any particular AI-driven business, for it to work, and it has to work in a very fast scenario, the product has to be highly significant, or either it has to solve a very critical problem in a particular industry or a particular culture. So therefore, if you have identified that, then you have to do it, and then it's very easier for you to go in this journey. So this particular journey is where, like, when you start a startup, like, when you start getting into the entrepreneurial journey, one of the part of your entrepreneurial journey is that either you make your startup a global company, or either you want to get it absorbed to a something which is much bigger. Now, a great example is WSO2. They started as a startup, and then they've been absorbed by this particular company, and that's the value that they've been shared. Like, was I'm not too sure the exact amount, but it was said that it was about $650 million investment. So that's what the dream of most of the investors. So how do you sell it? Either you sell it, either you make it a global and you make it go public. So those are the two things what we want to do as entrepreneurs. So if you start with that journey, like your initial stage will start with nothing. Like maybe it could be like you start with a small seed, but then the journey, you have to keep on focusing, keep on adapting, keep on improving is required. So then only you can reach out to your Series A funding. So you reach out to your investors and show like where your industry is moving, how significant is this problem, and why it's very important to have this company, all of that, or why it's important to have this particular technology right now. So likewise, you get your Series A, and then likewise, you'll be able to gain more investors. So that's how you plan your journey. And then just a tip, basically, if you want to start now, start with Gen AI, because Gen AI is more lucrative right now. But then 2 years later, it will be very important for you to, if at all, like if you are improving your technology, have a vision, have a roadmap. How do you really focus on artificial general intelligence, or AGI? So what it means is, artificial general intelligence is where we try to create AI, human-like AI, improving AI to that level. This is where most of the research goes right now. So all the products that we have in today's context, they are trying to develop the basically the AI is, as I said, AI is a part of the solution. So where it could be a part of the process, mostly AI is being a part of the process in any technology. So when it moves into the artificial general intelligence, where that your processes will be much more smoother for it to work as a human. It has to think as a human, the way how the neuro-minded or the the neurological mind, how it works, the way how the neuro system works. So likewise, in artificial general intelligence, the mind of AI will also work like-minded to a human. And then maybe 5 years down the line that you need to have a focus on adapting and thriving in large action models. I think I mentioned on that hype cycle as well. So the large action models, still this is an area which it has very lesser research done. But if you want to start now in this particular area, that's also advisable if you have a vision of creating a bigger AI startup. So this is an area where, I mean, still it's getting, it is still doing a lot of research in this area. There's nothing much has happened in terms of not significant as generative AI. So what happens in large action models is like, as we said earlier, large vision models that you can identify, read across all the visuals. So in large action models, principally, what happens is that it can act as a human and generate all the actions. So it's more like human-like technology that is thriving. And therefore, like for instance, with large action models, if you are into coding, you might not really need to do coding per se, that, you just have to give, maybe, there could be a way that you give the problem and it can identify the solution and can develop the entire technology also in a way. So that's where the technology is moving. So always focus on how do we improve your technologies. So don't stick into generative AI, though generative AI is today's buzzword. So always have a focus, and very important, build your team. Having a strong team is always very important. So if you can find a like-minded, but doesn't have to be like always someone who says yes to you. You need to have if you are a creative person, you need to have a very rational person as a co-founder, if at all. Sometimes it's better to do alone. It works. But even though, you need to have a very strong team and give them responsibility so that each and every person in your team is responsible for something. So therefore, when you're developing your startups, it's very important to have that team. And then finally, if you do proper generative AI, or rather, forget about generative AI, just do any AI startups. As I said earlier, look for the problem. That's all you need to do. Look for the problem in any particular industry, in any particular locality, or whether it's any particular culture. You will identify problems. Then think of how do I connect AI into this particular problem. Then you will be able to solve that faster than even you think. That's all. That's pretty much about from me. And then all what we can do is, if we do all of that together, if we build a better startup ecosystem, we don't have to bother too much about where Sri Lanka is now, right now, but we can build a better Sri Lanka with our startup mindset. See you soon. And thank you so much for being here. So hope to see you at EDEX. Thanks so much. I think we can answer the questions, right?
Yes, that's right, Seninda. Let
Okay.
me, so we have a couple of questions. Let me read out the first question.
Right.
So the first question we have is Gen AI returns already plateaued out with the current LLM models?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry,
Shall I
there's
answer
not.
that?
Okay, I think there's a two-part
Okay.
in the. I'll read out the other part as well. As AI returns, will plateau out soon if there is nothing drastically happen to the models currently existing.
Yeah, so I mean, so this is a very, I mean, the way how we have to understand that is a very good question, because what it mean by becoming plateau is basically it will become a mainstream. So which is true that, you know, when the like the current, or rather now, since this LAM is getting into the scenario, of course there will be a lot of research, like within like couple of years, within next 2 years time. That's why it said like generative AI will become getting into the plateau in 2 to 5 years. So which means that of course there is
Right.
a impact of the current the entering of LAM into the system is going to make generative AI getting into the plateau. So what it means is, what it mean by generative AI getting into plateau is, one, the cost of generative AI is going to get drastically reduced, because it is not going to be like it's like in today's context, when someone say, okay, that, you know, we work on machine learning, you know, you don't really give a, you know, like you don't really put a lot of high kind of what do you call it, like you're not willing to, you know, see to hear that as a magic. I said, okay, fine. But with someone say, okay, we are using these large vision models and we do generative AI into this. So people are saying, okay, wow, like, you know, still you have that wow. So what happens is, this particular demand of generative AI will reduce in terms of it will become mainstream. So everyone else in any industry that you need to use Gen AI, it will become a part of your mainstream. So for instance, if it is a garment, like let's say, let's take garment industry. So garment industry, I mean, I'm not too sure because I haven't really explored that industry yet. So generative AI will become a significant part of certain processes in the garment industry with that in next 2 to 5 years. So then it is a need requirement. And if you don't have that, then like you consider as a failure. So that will happen that way. So it's actually, there is a significant involvement of LAM will have a generative AI. I hope
Right.
I have given the answer for that question.
Thank you. Yes, Siddha, I think most comprehensive answer. I trust the question got a good resolution. Moving on to the next question. So it's a detailed question as well. As an innovator embarking on an AI-driven entrepreneurial journey, what comprehensive strategies should you implement to mitigate potential risks, including those related to market validation, data security, ethical considerations, scalability, legal compliance, and financial planning? Again, another two-parter. How can you ensure that your AI solutions not only address real user needs, but also adhere to evolving industry standards and regulations while remaining adaptable to changes in technology and market conditions?
Okay, so on the first question, basically, I think the answer is quite simple, because I think right now, especially when it comes to entrepreneurship, we take things step by step. So that's also a problem which we see, that as soon as when you see that, okay, this technology is becoming a significant thing, okay, then we have to look into these areas. So I'll give you a classic example for that. So last year we launched a generative AI technology for advertising. It's called Boutique Alchemist. It was predominantly, I mean, what we did was, it was already in a kind of a practice. It's called market mix modeling in communications, and like mostly into marketing. So what we did was, we created a generative AI practice. So we did a lot of research. We identified there are a lot of regression analysis and certain statistical modeling have been used by people in this particular area, but they haven't really explored artificial intelligence. So we wanted to get into that. So we actually, what we did was, we started creating a AI 1 year back. So we just started, we launched it, and it was a part of boutique agency's current offerings. They are being an ad agency. And then later on, we figure out when we were working on such projects, So number one was the data security, which was one of the critical things, like, how do we really ensure that this data is being secured? So one is that you need to use all sort of mechanisms, like, one is cybersecurity, but if you use your servers properly and if you have a proper cybersecurity, you can solve that. But then the legality, the compliance of it, like if you are using either, we call it the first party data. I mean, in that case, we don't collect first party data directly because these are the first party data of our client. So their data and how the compliance of that is going to work. So then we decided, so before we get into the market with the product to solve these matters, like to have a legal framework. So what is our compliance framework with this? So likewise, and 1 year back, we never had those issues. The 1 year back, all what we had was, okay, there was a problem and there is a solution for that. But then later on, within a year, the solution has to be driven through certain, there are certain disciplines. So as the one that who made that question very clearly asked those things, actually, those are the areas that we need to think of. So, but we have to go step by step. But if you try to solve all those problems, all those matters at the beginning, you might, drain, because you might have to spend a lot even before you start not even earning out of it. Because sometimes what happens is, as soon as you see, okay, this is going to get a sale, or rather this is going to get funds, therefore now we can add these elements into it. So it is a step-by-step process. So Mahesh, is it possible for you to repeat the second question?
Yes, absolutely. So the second part is, how can you ensure that your AI solutions not only address real user needs, but also adhere to evolving industry standards and regulations while remaining adaptable to changes in technology and market conditions?
Exactly. So that's absolutely a very valid question, because I think the most important thing in terms of identifying those problems, that you need to focus current and the future problems. So I'll give you a classic example in media industry, like media advertising industry. Now these days they've been facing a problem. The problem was actually there is no such funds, not funds, sorry. There is no such research available to identify the audience television viewership. So that was actually 70-80% of, rather 70% of the total media budgets goes into television in Sri Lanka, approximately. But there is no such way for us to understand whether we are putting our commercials in the right programs or not, because there is no such measurement system available right now, because there was a measurement system and it was stopped. And there was a scenario which one of the university, local university, they identified this problem, maybe, through some industry sessions or insights. And they thought that because they have got a grant from one of these, the university has got a grant from an organization, so that they are going to invest in such new technologies. It's basically like a patent. So they they got a patent for a new measurement system, and then they have done like their groundwork. They are all youngsters, and then they had a meeting with, they had a couple of meetings, and then they recently had a meeting with the industry fraternity. So when we were sort of sitting there and then we were discussing, so what we figured was they've been trying to do all this, they've been focusing a lot on privacy, all of that. But then they are trying to solve, they put a lot of effort to solve a existing issue. But then our question is now, okay, so having a technology for this particular matter, for this industry, is right now we don't have anything, there is a vacuum. But now the problem is, our biggest problem is, it's not about like maybe in 5 years down the line, our problem is not to measure, how many people are watching television. Our problem could be like, how do we target this multi-screening consumer in a different way, or rather, I mean, could be a different scenario altogether. Their journey could have changed. So therefore, it's very important when you are developing a technology, or when you are trying to understand a problem, you need to understand the granularity of the problem, and you have to forecast. So if that problem is relevant or related to a consumer, we call it a consumer, like looking at it as a human. So let's say in 5 years down the line, how that consumer will change. Now, for instance, if you do a product or something, an idea for a set of youngsters, let's say we want to do something for Gen Z, like, okay, you do something for Gen Z right now, but in 5 years down the line, will that product is relevant to the Gen Z who's 5 years old? Or on the other end, will that product is applicable for that Gen Alpha? Because it might be completely different. So therefore, it's very important to understand whether you are going to solve a issue right now, a short-term thing, or a long-term thing by looking at the granularity of the problem. So how expandable is this problem? But when you're developing a technology, now Netflix is a very good example. As I said, like Netflix was not an app. We all got to know, I mean, most of you guys got to know Netflix through the app, but predominantly what they did was they created a different methodology long time back back in the days when people were doing this renting of DVDs. They created a model, and basically they were collecting data, and they've been creating a kind of a, I don't know, I don't remember the exact story, but basically they started long before this whole app story, long before this whole OTT story. But Netflix won the game because their backbone was collecting data and trying to understand certain nitty-gritties of the problems of people. So therefore, Netflix had a long journey, and then they grew and they adapted to the technology changes, and still today that they are, thriving.
Right. Once again, thank you. Most comprehensive answer. So I'm sure the person who asked the question got a good answer. So looks like Seninda, all the questions we have answered.
All right.
So I want to, on behalf of EDEX, thank you very much for taking the time and for conducting this most insightful seminar. I believe certainly you have provided anybody looking to get started with a AI-driven entrepreneurial career many good tips and tricks, and also things to look for and avoid. Like, I think a good point was that if you are looking for quick money, this might not be the thing. And also, I got reminded how old I am by the DVDs renting. So brought some good memories. So thank you, Seninda. Thank you so much. Very insightful seminar and very interesting.
All right, thank you so much. If there are any further questions, maybe we can either you can reach me out,
Yes,
or
certainly.
I guess we can meet at EDEX.
Yeah, absolutely. On September 6, 7, and 8 at BMSCH. Seninda will be doing 2 seminars as well. So make sure you tune in for those as well.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here with me. Good night.
Good night.
ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ විශාලතම උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ප්‍රදර්ශනය සහ රැකියා පොළ EDEX Mid-Year Expo 2024 සැප්තැම්බර් 6 7 සහ 8 BMICH හිදී දේශීය හා විදේශීය උසස් අධ්‍යාපන ආයතන 100කට වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් සමගින්.
Don't miss the EDEX Mid-Year Expo 2024, Sri Lanka's largest education exhibition and job fair, September 6th, 7th and 8th at BMICH. Discover the best in higher education and future career paths. Entrance free.